Guys, welcome back. Part 3. Today we're going to be talking again about the endorsement process for the Global Talent Visa, but what we're going to be talking about is optional criteria 1, which is innovation as either a founder, a senior executive, or as an employee. The geezer for the visa, I'm here to help. My name is Amr Zaman. I have been a solicitor for over 14 years. I've been involved in immigration for around 18 years now. So when it comes to the global talent visa applications, it's safe to say I've been around the block. I'm here to just kind of provide some value to you guys so that it's a bit more easier for you to understand the global talent visa endorsement process. It can be very information heavy. It's it can be difficult to navigate through because it's not like a standard visa process. To a lot of people, it's unknown, and all you can rely on are YouTube videos from people who have been through the process. There's not a lot of people just giving general advice which can help people go through the process, or if they're at the beginning of the process, to understand what kind of documents they need. Because obviously when people who have been through the process report back, they're reporting back from their own point of view, and it's very specific to their circumstances. So as an experienced immigration solicitor here in the UK, I kind of just want to help you from a broader sense, to make you understand or to help you realize what's needed for an endorsement application, because we've been through so many with my clients, and I've seen so many rejected and refused applications, and I'm hoping that some of that experience I can now bring back to you guys so that you don't fall into some of the pitfalls other people have. So without further delay, let's get into it. So when it comes to optional criteria 1 and demonstrating innovation, it's not enough to say that you worked in a tech company in the past, or you founded a tech company which has made a product in the digital technology field. It's not enough, because a lot of the time these companies are kind of reinventing the wheel a little bit. They might be adding things, but is that really innovation? Not for Tech Nation, it's not. When it comes to Tech Nation, what they're looking for is that you've significantly contributed to or led a company as an employee or a founder or a senior exec on a product which has built something important, something new, or solved a problem that hadn't been solved yet. That's their definition of innovation. And that's what you need to be able to prove when it comes to the optional criteria. So when it comes to this optional criteria, what are Tech Nation looking for? So essentially, they're looking for something which is new, something that's not been out there in the market before, and something which has come along and solved a problem for users. And that's their basic definition when it comes to innovation. And when it comes to innovation, my favorite term, as you've seen over the last few videos, the innovation needs to have had real impact and added real value to whichever space that the product relates to. And they need to be able to measure that. And that's where, for example, they are looking for evidence of growth, of increase in users. It may be a valuation of the company has jumped from where it was to what it is now. These are significant kind of metrics that the Tech Nation or the endorsing body will look to when it comes to innovation in that field and that criteria. So some of the examples of innovation within products that have been now founded or have been released to the market could be in AI, it could be in machine learning, it could be a fintech tool, it could be a SaaS model or a SaaS product which you've taken to launch. So these are some of the examples that we've seen successful candidates or applicants for the endorsement under the Global Talent Visa. So it's quite widespread, but again, it needs to show that it's been innovative, not something where you've just reinvented the wheel of something that was already there. Now, unlike the Innovator Founder Visa, they will consider something where an app has been developed because it will have solved a problem. So it's not quite the same as the Innovator Founder Visa. Tech Nation and the Global Talent has a slightly different kind of view when it comes to innovation. With Global Talent, they really mean innovation, something new, something which helps solve a problem. Whereas with the Innovator Founder Visa, you're looking for something which has been more like invention. They're not looking for quite innovation. So the Innovator Founder tag is quite deceptive because you're looking at invention. But when it comes to Global Talent Visa, innovation is enough. And that's something to kind of bear in mind when you're relying on the optional criteria. So those are examples for founders who want to rely on this criteria. Now, when you're an employee or a senior exec, well, you're looking more in terms of physically being involved in the development of that product. So if you can show evidence that you led the team or that you significantly contributed to the development of that product, well, then that's something you can rely on when it comes to the innovation aspect of an endorsement application. And if that product immediately solves issues like scaling or improving security, then that's the kind of impact that Tech Nation would look for if you're relying on this criteria. So that's how we can differentiate between founders and the employees and the senior execs. So the founders will have be the founder of a product-led company which has brought this product to market, shown the significant contribution that it's made in that space, either through the commercial side of things or in terms of the users. But then if you're an employee or a senior exec, it's the physical involvement in that. If you can show you've led or you physically worked in the development and added significantly with your contributions, then you can rely on this criteria. So when it comes to the documents to prove, because the whole endorsement application relies on documents. I mean, it's the thing that gets you the endorsement essentially. So there's a wide kind of variety of documentation that can be provided which will support the optional criteria for innovation. Now, this will be dependent on whether you're coming from the founder point of view or a senior executive or an employee point of view. So if you're coming from the founder point of view, you're looking at investment documents, you're looking at accounts, you're looking at media coverage, you're looking at people who have approached you in terms of understanding the product more. So you may look at VCs that may have been in touch with you. So from a founder perspective, that's what you could rely on when it comes to the innovation. Now, that doesn't mean you can't rely on some of the documents that employees can rely on, because you need to show the innovation. So you may want to provide screenshots or architecture documents. And this is something that an employee or the senior exec can also rely on. Even letters from senior leadership, if you're an employee especially, to kind of positively talk about your impact or your contribution to the project. That is something the employees can rely on. There could be repositories on GitHub, or there could be just engagement on open source tools, which will speak to how innovative that product has been. So there is a real range of documents that can be relied on. It just depends on what angle you're coming from, whether you're coming from a founder point of view or whether you're coming from founder or senior exec point of view. It's really important to kind of work that out, because then you can provide the documents. Now, when it comes to how many of the documents you need to provide, well, again, this will depend on how many documents you have for the mandatory criteria and the second optional criteria that you want to rely on, because you don't want to go heavy on one over the other. You want to have an even spread. And innovation is quite a good one that people rely on because technology is so innovative. And remember, it doesn't need to be something that you're working on currently. It should be something that you've done over the last 3, 4, 5 years even. You don't want to go back more than 5 years. That's kind of like a key part of this. If you can keep your evidences to within the last 5 years, you really stand a good chance. So again, when it comes to the innovation, if you can show the product was innovative in 2023, 2024, it's something you can rely on. It doesn't mean you have to show that you're working on it currently. So that's the kind of documents that you need to show innovation. And just to kind of round up, when it comes to documentation, the weak documents are, from a founder perspective, you might have an incorporation certificate, you might have a pitch deck, it's not enough as a founder to show that your product has been innovative. And I've seen people provide these documents, and what's sometimes concerning is they actually have better documents that they can write, that they can rely on, but they come with these documents first, and it's like, well, actually, where is the innovation in your incorporation certificate? So that doesn't really help. If you're an employee and you're providing a basic job contract, again, it doesn't help your cause. So these are some of the weak documents that we see from individuals looking to apply for an endorsement. You want to focus on the innovation, whether as a founder or as an employee slash senior exec. You want to show documents which attest to the fact that the product is innovative. So at the beginning of the video, I simply defined what innovation is. Now, even then, it still can be difficult to kind of wrap your head around what Tech Nation are looking for. And then when you kind of think about what documents you want to provide as part of the reliance on optional criteria 1 when it comes to innovation, you're thinking about, okay, how do I assess whether this document is important enough? So there are some key questions that you need to think of. The first question is, what problem existed that we had to find a solution for? So identify what was the problem beforehand, and then what did you build or lead or significantly contribute towards which solved that problem? So that's the second question you need to think about. Then you need to think about, okay, what was different about your product which solved the problem? Or how has your product been something different to anything that already is on the market? That's something you need to think about. And then again, you need to think about your personal role. How did you contribute to this? That's something which, if you consider and again make a rounded assessment, will allow you to make the decision, is this document the document I want to rely on for this criteria? And if you answer positively, then put that document in. And then, because we're always thinking about impact, we're thinking about the value that you bring, you need to think about the impact of your product on the users. Have they benefited from it? And if they have benefited from it, are our numbers in terms of users or customers or clients, is it going up? Because that's where you can judge the impact that your product has had. And if the numbers reflect that, then definitely it's a document that you want to provide. So when we're looking at this optional criteria, Tech Nation doesn't want to know that your company as a founder or as an employee or a senior executive is innovative. They don't want to know that because they can find that out. They want to know your contribution to that innovative product. That's what they want to see, because innovative products are coming up every day. But if you weren't part of either building that or leading the company or setting the examples, then your contribution is minimal. And that's where Tech Nation will kind of be turned off in terms of whether you are someone who's actively participated in the building of this innovative product. So remember, it's not enough to have an innovative company. We need to show that you personally contributed to that innovative product, and that's really important. So a couple of practical examples I can give you is, we had a founder who was in Korea. He founded a fintech company, and he was able to rely on the metric growth of the company from a commercial point of view, the valuation of the company. So for example, when it started up to where it ended up, he had a letter from VC. We were able to show the significant increase month on month again when it comes to users. And these were the types of evidences that we could provide to show that there was a real case when it came to innovation, and for him to rely on the optional criteria when it comes to innovation. Now, from an employee point of view, we previously had an employee who worked on an AI product. It was a fraud detection product, which he built through with his team for a product-led company. They were based in the US as well, so a lot of these companies do come from the US. And the evidence that he was able to provide us were screenshots, before and after, media coverage. We were able to provide architecture documents as well, and this really went to the heart of the innovation. So it's not showing so much the significant commercial contribution, but the actual technical contribution. So as an employee, you don't expect them to be able to provide evidences of financial kind of increase or payment volumes, etc. What you're relying on is the actual contribution when it comes to the making of the product. So we were able to provide those documents for that client who wanted to rely on optional criteria number one. We're going to turn our attention now to some of the questions that I've had from clients in the past, and just again to give you kind of an insight into what people are thinking about when they're applying for the endorsement application for the global talent visa. Now, one of the first questions which always pops up is if I'm relying on the innovation criteria, the optional criteria one, do I need a product which I have a patent for? The answer is no, not necessarily. There are other ways that you can prove the innovation, whether it's through media coverage, whether it's through the company website, platforms, etc. This can prove the innovation. Obviously, if you have a patent, it helps. No doubt, but it's not a game changer. So if you don't have the patent, you can still apply on the innovation criteria. Another question which routinely comes up, more from the employees rather than founders or senior execs, is can I rely on documents which are confidential? Immediately, the first thing I say is be very careful, because you may have signed confidentiality agreements or NDAs, which means you can't then use documents which belong to the company. So you will need to speak to senior management about that. One thing that you can present to them is that documents can be redacted, but remember, the documents need to be personal to you. If you have a document which is not personal to you, it's not worth taking the risk. Another question that I get is if it's a famous company, does that help? Yes and no, because remember, it's not about the company, it's about your contribution. So definitely if you've worked on a product with a reputable company, that will be in the back of Tech Nation's mind when they're considering the endorsement. But if the documents do not kind of attest to your contribution, it's not going to matter much whether your company is famous or not. So it's a very subjective kind of answer to that question. The final question I can think of, which routinely comes up, and it's quite regular actually, especially in the tech scene, is if I founded a startup, but the startup failed, can I rely on evidence from that company? Yes, it's possible, but it depends on your definition of failure, because if you have made a product as a founder and it's failed, well then where's the kind of significant commercial contribution that comes out of that? So it's again very subjective. We'd have to consider the evidence. It could help more for an employee, I think, because it depends on the contribution that was made by that product. And if you can show that the startup failed, but someone else has taken on the baton, or another company has taken on the idea and developed it, you can show the innovation came from you, then it's something you might be able to rely on. So it's something to think about. Right, guys, so that was optional one. When it comes to innovation, it's a kind of, I would say, a popular option that a lot of people rely on because technology is so innovative. Every day we're seeing new innovation, especially when it comes to AI and machine learning and cybersecurity. So it's definitely something which you should think about in terms of relying on in your endorsement application. But the other thing you need to think about is when you provide the evidences to back up your claims, it needs to relate to you. If it relates to just your company, it may not be something that you can convince the endorsing body to grant you an endorsement for. So it's definitely something to think about, but more importantly, you really need to make your mark on the documents that you provide. So once again, I thank you guys for the time and effort that you've put in to listening. I hope that I've been able to add some value and given you a bit more of an understanding of what the optional criteria is about, especially when it comes to innovation. Again, it can be quite overwhelming when you're reading through all the material when it comes to the endorsement process and the global talent visa. So if I've been able to help you just 1%, Just put a like, share, subscribe, because it's very important that we get this information out there, so that we can help anyone that needs that help. That's the whole point of it. So once again, guys, thank you very much. Stay safe and take care.